Welcome, fellow synthesizer sickos. I am Vulture Culture, and tonight we're checking out the Alesis Andromeda from 2000. So if you aren't familiar with this synthesizer, it came out in the dark ages of analog synthesizers. In fact, in the 90s, early 2000s, there were almost no analog synthesizers coming out. Bob Moog hadn't come out with the Voyager yet. That would come out in 2002. And Dave Smith hadn't started coming out with analog synths either. So this really kind of comes into its own sort of place in history as an incredible synth, because 16 voices with voltage-controlled oscillators, 2 voltage-controlled oscillators per voice, as well as 2 voltage-controlled filters per voice, really sets it into its own league. So comparing it even with modern synthesizers, modern discontinued synthesizers, because both the Korg Prolog 16-voice VCO-based synth only has 1 filter per voice. Same story with the Moog 1, which can be 16 voices. Also, only 1 ladder filter per voice. This synthesizer has 2. One is an Oberheim SEM style 2-pole filter that can be both a low pass, high pass, as well as band pass or notch filter by combining the high pass and low pass filters. And then we have a Moog style ladder filter. And what's so crazy to me is that at the time of this synthesizer coming out, the creators of the synth actually went to Tom Oberheim and Bob Moog and asked them, hey, is it okay if we use your circuits to make the synthesizer? And because neither of them were making analog synths at the time, they said, sure, go ahead. We're just happy for someone to be using those original circuits. Damien, I don't know how Alesis accomplished it. It's incredible. It is something else. Now, there's also kind of a contingent of synth snobs out there. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat who will say the synth sounds cold or it sounds not that great? And so I'm very excited tonight to check it out with you guys live. I've just turned it on and made sure everything worked before the stream, but I haven't really had a chance to dig into the thing. And I'm going to do that with you guys live. Now, I want to first address kind of like one of the elephants in the room, which is the presets, which for me are very, very tacky. I'm not really into what's going on with a lot of these. I think that they can be very just strange sounding and, like this type of thing. You get a lot of kind of tacky 90s. I mean, it's not a terrible sound. That one actually was pretty okay. But there is this like weird thing with this where this has got to be the only analog synth I can think of where the presets make it sound like it's virtual analog. I don't have the card for this, Analog Rich. So we're not going to spend too much time on the presets because I don't love them. And you can hear we have built-in effects, and they also too have a very 90s sheen. And I love the sound of the 80s, like the MIDI Verb 2, those types of vintage Alesis effects. To me, so far, and I haven't dug into it, like I said, the effects do not sound like I would use them. Yeah, that's the thing, Mike Thompson, that a lot of the presets sort of have that. Well, that's a pretty badass one. So we do have analog distortion in here. So that's pretty cool. this is a good preset to sort of show what's going on. So what I'm hearing here is both the Oberheim low pass and high pass. So if you have both of those at the same time, it's creating a notch sort of a thing, which you could really only do with a synthesizer like the Matrix 12 expander at the time. That's actually very beautiful. I like that one a lot. But the point here is that a decent amount of these presets, I actually ended up with a bunch of good ones, which I suppose is good to get people excited for the stream. But I thought we should just dive right into sound design, because unlike a lot of the times, the first time I get a synth, I like to really show off the presets here on the stream. I thought, let's just go ahead and dive right in. So when you open up the default program, it sounds like this. So what we're hearing is actually the sawtooth and triangle on both of the oscillators running through the Moog filter with no resonance. So let's just compare the filters real quick. So we have this really gorgeous sounding Moog ladder filter that can go pretty aggressive. Really smooth sounding filter. And then we have this Oberheim style filter. Let's go ahead and add some release. And how much fun is it to have an Oberheim style filter if we don't detune the oscillators a bit? And then as we add resonance here, cheers in the chat. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. This one's going to be fun. So what are we hearing with this filter? Into unison mode, right? So if we go to unison, we have a few different modes. Like let's say we threw 8 voices on, and so that would be like an Oberheim OBX8, right? A sound, and then we can even detune that further, right? of something that's a little bit more complicated. So if I want to get a stereo spread, unlike on something like a modern sequential synth where a lot of the times it's just like one button, I was looking at how to do this earlier. So the first thing we need to do is go to mod. So basically everything on the synthesizer has a button or two or three. So for instance, the oscillator, I've got 3 mod switches here, which is kind of nice. So for panning, I've got a mod switch. So it's great that we have that. And it does kind of lead to it's a very one knob per function synthesizer and only a little bit of this going in here and going deep. But this is an example of something where I'm like, okay, I got to go find sample and hold. Where's sample and hold? She's here somewhere. There it is, sample and hold level. And I need to set the offset to like -50 or so. And then we have to go over to sample and hold, view that. And now we're going to set the source to that. And this is interesting. We're looking for a phrase, which I think is voice random. I want to say that's what this is called. So okay, so here's voice random. And then I need to enter the trigger submenu. And so if I'm in the trigger submenu, then I can make sure everything is on. And if I did it correctly, we should have stereo spread. So there she is. I mean, just the most satisfying sound that I can think of. However, that was a lot of steps. And so that's kind of the pros and cons of this synthesizer, right? Is to do certain things like that, it's not the quickest thing. And for me, I would actually just kind of save this into the patch. Because if I turn unison off, for instance, now every time I play, I'm going to get a different voice. Again, this is if I did it correctly in the stereo spectrum. Which is really my favorite thing. I'm not even the biggest fan of unison patches, super saws and things like that. I quite like just when the voices bounce around in the stereo spectrum. And I love it when they do it randomly or like on a Matrix 12 Oberheim synth where you can pan the voices individually. I don't actually love on the Dave Smith stuff where it just goes left to right, because if you're playing a pattern that has, let's say, 4, 6, 8, 12 notes in it, it's always going to be the same. And that can kind of be annoying sometimes, depending on what kind of sequence you're doing. Like, if that's only going left to right, that can be, and you play the right notes, of course, then it can be a little bit of an annoying thing. So for me, I quite like when you can set it up to be random, and we can do that here. But at the same time, there is just this element of that was a few steps to get there. So we can now, let's turn the resonance down. Let's bring the high pass filter in. So this is like what blew my mind, if I'm being honest with you guys. And at first I was thinking to myself, well, you know, I'm very fortuitous to have something like a Matrix 12 behind me. So is this synth really going to impress me, considering that even the designers of this synthesizer said, hey, we're chasing the Matrix 12. We're trying to do something like the Matrix 12, but in 2000. You know, what would that synth be like 15 years later? And what's so crazy is this synth is 25 years old now. So it's one of those things where when this came out, even though to me it kind of feels like a modern synth, the truth is it's really still closer to that earlier era of synthesis. But anyways, one thing that you can do here that might seem really subtle, but to me is like blew my mind, is the fact that you can mix all of the different filter types. And just the ability, for instance, you on the Matrix 12 or an Oberheim OBX8, you know, a new synthesizer, you pick the notch mode, right? In this case, we actually are controlling, you know, the individual volume. So if I want to get like a little thinner of a notch pad. I mean, it's so insanely gorgeous sounding. And then let's say we wanted to go in the other direction, right? Let's say, and essentially this is what's happening under the hood, by the way, in an Oberheim OB6 or a TO5, a sequential Oberheim TO5. When you morph between low pass and notch, what you're really doing is just turning down the low pass and increasing the high pass here. So let's do that real quick. So let's start with a good amount of low pass. And then just a little bit of high pass. And then let's add some resonance. So, I mean, just in this one example here, I hope that I've been able to show some of you scum snobs out there that this synthesizer does not have to sound like its fat, can sound really gorgeous and in its own league. Before we're even talking about 16 voice polyphony, you know, the goddamn ribbon controller. Banana Rider 69, what a great name. Welcome. It's already to me showing its capacity. Now, one thing I will say is listening to this compared to, I have a couple of vintage Oberheims. I will say that this filter, now I can't compare it to a SEM, which is what this filter is actually based off of, a 12 decibel or 2-pole filter. To me, though, it's kind of getting like acidy, right? I don't know if for you guys you're getting that same sort of vibe to it. Mike Thompson asks, what does the keybed feel like? It is the type of keybed that I like. And what's great about it is, and I don't know, I'll just turn the volume down for a second here. So the keybed feels great. Now, I'm used to, I full disclosure here, I am used to terrible keybeds because I have a bunch of vintage synths, and vintage synths, most, like, you can buy $100 MIDI controller nowadays that has a better keybed than a lot of vintage synths. That just is what it is. So I'm used to pretty clacky, insonic, Korg DW8000 type keybeds that are just not great. So for me, this is like Lamborghini shit, you know? It feels so smooth. I like a sharp edge. This is moderately rounded. So there's that, but for me, it feels great. The biggest thing that I'm a sucker for is with Aftertouch, when you press the keys down, and I hope you can see this well on stream, you have a little bit more throw there. And what you're seeing there is from the key down position all the way to the bottom of the Aftertouch range, you've got that extra bit. And I love that. Whereas on a lot of synthesizers, vintage synths, you feel like you're pressing those keys against the metal, and then you have to keep pressing them, and it feels like you're going to snap something to get the Aftertouch to engage. And maybe that's some of these of dusty old Aftertouch. Analog Rich says it's Vulture. I didn't look it up before the stream. I should have. But I trust you, Rich. To me, it feels great. And if it is Vulture, that would make sense because it feels a lot like the way the Aftertouch is on the Prophet 12 behind me. So if you're familiar with that, I love that in a synthesizer. But I know not everybody does. There are some people who hate it when synths, and I feel like I've heard that complaint maybe about Polybrute recently or another one, Polybrute 12, where there's so much range here that it can be confusing where the note stops. And like definitely on the Prophet 12, I've had a couple of times where I'm engaging the Aftertouch accidentally. There are global settings in here for Aftertouch sensitivity. What I noticed when just turning this thing on and making sure it worked and checking out a few patches that did have Aftertouch, what I noticed is the Aftertouch felt very on and off when I was pressing it. I don't know if the previous owner had set it up that way, so it was kind of on. I like a nice slow Aftertouch where it's like we're here and then we're at like value 25, value 75, value 100, like where it takes a little bit of effort to actually, like you almost have to do like a push-up on the synthesizer to get that Aftertouch. Damien says he played a Polybrute 12 yesterday, but do you know what I'm saying about how it, like, some people have said the key bed, I haven't played one myself, is a little squishy or something like that. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Oh, and you like the key bed. So let's check out the bandpass filter on the SEM. No resonance first. That is a gorgeous, absolutely. RWD Life. I don't own an Ion. If you're looking at that, that's a Modulus 002. I haven't compared it. It would be interesting though, right? Because that's kind of their digital synth that came out at around the same time. And what's also interesting is the heritage of the synthesizer. So if you guys are really deep in the synthesizer lore, I should probably keep playing stuff so that people don't get bored of my voice. I love history and things like that, but I know not everybody does. I'll say it quickly. Marcus Ryle was like the lead designer with Michel Doadic on the Matrix 12, Oberheim Expander, and Oberheim OB8, and the new Oberheim OBX8. After leaving Oberheim, he joined Alesis for a time as a contractor and worked actually on the Quadrasynth. And a lot of the rest of the team that worked on the Quadrasynth went on to make this synth. So there is like kind of a Marcus Ryle heritage to this in the sense that the team that he sort of coached through the all digital Quadrasynth years, then we're like, we want to go after daddy's, pride and joy, the Matrix 12, and we want to make a synthesizer. Dubstation Zero, welcome. How's it going? Rob, swords and synthesizers. This thing weighs a good amount. And in fact, I was hoping to put it up on my stand and do the stream with the Prophet 12, where the Prophet 12 is behind me. And it is so much, like the Prophet 12 is only this much of the synthesizer from like here to here. It's a big, tall boat of a synthesizer, which you know Daddy likes. So yeah, I think they sound great. However, I could understand someone being like, hey, this filter doesn't exactly sound like a SEM. Again, I can't compare it, but comparing it to the vintage Oberheims I do have, it does have a certain kind of more distorted character. If you dial it back just even a little bit, then it kind of doesn't have as much of a talky character as the Oberheims, growly. So there's this very narrow sweet spot here. So it certainly has that. Then we have our low pass filter too. So this is the Moog filter. And with this filter, just like on a Moog, you lose a lot of bass and volume. So with that off, I'll turn the volume down here. Carl, how's it going? Carl from Angel Spit. And then again, that resonance, you get there pretty quickly. Rob, I wouldn't ever gig with this, and maybe for a reason that's not obvious. So this synthesizer uses custom A6 chips, which is actually where the name comes from. Because if you think about it, it's very strange that the Andromeda A6 is called A6, because most of the time when you see a number with a synthesizer like the Jupiter 8, why is it called the Jupiter 8? Because it has 8 voices. The Korg Poly 6. Why is it called the Poly 6? Well, because it has 6 voices. Juno 6, same thing. Kwai SX240, 24 oscillators. I actually don't know if that's why it's called that. But with this synthesizer, it should be the Andromeda A16, right? But it's actually a play on words. So these custom A6 chips that go into this, the problem with them is Alesis made them for this synth and for this synth only. So if one of those chips goes, that's kind of it. Like you're going to have to cannibalize another A6 to fix it, which makes this synth kind of a little bit dangerous to own. This one seems to be in great shape, but I plan on taking it in and actually getting it looked at and just making sure the power caps and everything are great. And one of the things that can put stress on a synthesizer and on the chips in particular is if there's bad power situations. And if you're playing live, the thing is you're quite likely to be in a situation where the power could be all over the place. If you play at a festival, that's definitely the case. It could be like that. Fuck yeah, Carl. I love that and I appreciate it. Can we get a scum cheers, by the way, guys, for the people who hang out here every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. We always do some sort of synthesizer-oriented stream. So if you're new here, welcome. Welcome to the Scum family. Sometimes people ask me why I call the community here the Scum family, and the reason is because if you're scum, you don't look down on anybody. And I've been scum my whole life. So welcome, guys. Cheers. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. So this filter can definitely get into that self-oscillating territory that the Oberheim one can't. But at the penalty, Freeze Etch, welcome. We got Jason Ambient Knots here. Hello, how's it going? Yeah, so Kurzweil 2,500 because it cost 25 grand. 40 Thieves, old scum. Great to see everybody here. And by old, I don't mean age. I just mean you've been hanging out in this channel for years now, which I appreciate. Sven, that's a great question. They are owned by the same company that owns Moog now, right? So that's very interesting. And one of the parts of like the Moog Muse release, and they've had some rocky things with that synthesizer. Florian called it a buggy mess. And recently this week, Tim Shoebridge brought up the hashtag dodgy waveforms, which I'm a fan of his branding there of the issue. But Alesis has had incredible MIDI implementation and all of the stuff that you wouldn't expect to be a problem on a Moog synth. The Moog 1 is famous for having a lot of MIDI implementation errors and hanging notes and all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't have to deal with a regular synthesizer, especially not one that launched for, I think, over 10 grand or something crazy like that. So yeah, In Music, that's correct, owns Alesis now. And so it's this interesting thing. Juno 6 wrote an article comparing an SEM to A6. Please drop it in the chat or email it to me. I'd love to read it, Juno 6, because I'd be curious to see how it compares. I do think I'll do a stream at some point comparing this to the Matrix 12 too, just because to my ear, the filters do have a different character, but that's not necessarily bad. So let's turn all of that off for a second. And we also have a pre-filter here. Currently being run through a ring mod. I did Aquatic, the hashtag dodgy waveforms. I just think that Moog really fucking needed to stick the landing with the Muse, and they have not seemed to have done that, sadly. And so what's incredible is like we can get a custom mix of all of these filters here if we want to like get mostly bandpass but a little bit of high pass in there, and then some of the low pass from the Moog with resonance. You know, we can do that. Jim asked, do you have the Alaska pack? It's in my user bank, one of my favorites. Yes, I do. And you know what was interesting about that one? Might take me a second to find it. I do remember seeing it though. Let's go ahead, and I think it was in preset 2 maybe. It'll take me a second here to find it. If I have it. Here we go. 30s. Matrix pad is good here, clearly taking on the Matrix 12. $29 for you. Let's go ahead and check that out and see if I have it. Alaska. Here we go. User. Thank you for your quick. So what's interesting about this patch is it sounds very similar to the Alaska patch that exists in the SY99, the Yamaha SY99, and the Yamaha EX5. They both have that patch, if I am recalling correctly. So I wonder if that's a recreation of that. And I don't know, is it a recreation visions of the UK song Alaska? I don't know. Wondered if it was from the Vangelis Alaska documentary. Is that what it's from, or if it's something else? And Nenko, welcome. Yes, we have one in the studio. It's very exciting to have it here for now. DeCarmick asks, could you get that out of a TO5? There's no reason you couldn't. I mean, it might not sound identical, but that synthesizer has all of these different types of filters as well. And in particular, the two-pole. It's the same two-pole thing. Whereas I believe on OBX8, it depends on which mode you're in, right? Because if it's in OBX mode, you have access to those two-pole filters. But then OBXA and OB8 modes are going to be the four-pole. I want to say one of those had a swappable pole, but yeah, anyways, it's going to be interesting. Mark, I am very lucky to sometimes get offers to buy synthesizers at lower than the market price, and I saw this one and I went for it. And I also believe, especially because of everything that's happening with the tariffs right now, it's a very unstable time in the market, and things could get more expensive. And I don't know if people have really thought about this, but if, let's say, the way it plays out is that tariffs increase the cost of modern synths, right? That means that used synthesizers are going to fly off the shelves compared to what they normally do, because let's say you've been saving up money for an Oberheim TO5 for $1,500 or so, and then all of a sudden the price gets raised to $2,200 or something like that. Let's say, I'm just spitballing here, don't quote me on this. All of a sudden you might look at a used TO5 for $1,200. And I know there's some people who never buy used synths. They just want a new synth. They want it to be, unmolested, right? But the difference between $1,500 and $1,200, it's not that big of a difference. I might spring for the new one, I get a warranty and all of that. But when it's something like $2,200 versus $1,200, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second. It's like, this is a mint condition TO5 for $1,200. I would go for that. And again, the numbers and even the model of the synth I'm talking about is just all hypothetical. What's the price on a TO5 now, Adapt? If I'm correct too, speaking about the Yamaha CS80, this synth, I do believe, has glissando. I could be wrong. Something else really cool about this ribbon controller that might not be obvious. If we want, we can actually use the hold feature. And now when I do that same filter sweep, right? It holds it at that point, which is a very useful feature. So yeah, it's already gone up to 1850, not quite 2200. But you see my point, right? Because everybody who bought that synthesizer and put it up for sale at, $1,200 or something. And so vintage synth prices too are likely to go up soon, not because people are scalpers, because what I've noticed is most people, it's corporations that tend to scalp. And of course, you're always going to get a couple of bad apples. in a bushel. But my experience is almost everybody I've met in the vintage synth community are they're not trying to screw anybody. They just want to sell a synth at a reasonable, fair price. But what's going to happen is all of those people are going to sell their synths out. There's going to be potentially, again, this is all conjecture. It could change tomorrow depending on what Donald Trump decides to do. And I do not want to talk about politics here. I'm just talking about tariffs and their effects on the market, because that's what this channel is about, the synthesizer and the synthesizer market. But the thing is that if things go the way they're going, what we could see is that there could be a lot of vintage synths could sell out, because even if you were thinking of buying a modern Oberheim, right? But you can get a Matrix for, around $1,000, right? A modern Oberheim at $1,850, the cheapest one you can get, starts to feel more expensive when you can buy a vintage Matrix 6 or, for maybe like $1,400 or something, right? And then you're like, you don't have to play that game that DeKarmic is playing of like, ooh, is this legit? Like, I know that the amplifiers are digital, not analog, right? So is that going to sound quite as vintage? Well, you could just buy a vintage synth, right? So anyways, I should probably get $2,300 fucking dollars in Canada. And $3,500 new inbox for what synth is that, Mark Anderson? That is crazy how much it's been going through. Right. So Chris Di Giuseppe points out that you can run each individual output to its own mixer channel, pan them all around in the stereo field, and press the voice output button on the upper right. So that's another way we could get there. Right now, I just have using sample and hold to do a similar thing. So what we could do is just go to program, new program, store, and now we're back to our basic sound. So what I want to do now is create like a bass type sound, something like that could be kind of fun to do. And we could even maybe mess around with the sequencer. I haven't really messed with it too much. Let me see what happens if I go... What do I have to do to record into this thing? It looks like configure, trigger, program. Is that? Nah, graph. Is there a record button? Let's see here. I'd love to be able to actually like just load in like a step over here. So we could create ourselves a little bass line type of a sound. That sounds pretty good. And what I want to play with is now we actually have a sub oscillator on each of the oscillators. So that's with no detune. him, a CS30 is one of those synthesizers I've always wanted to check out. Do you see what I'm saying about the resonance on this actually sounds a bit acidy to me compared to what I think of as an Oberheim sound. And of course, we can use both at the same time. Now let's see how hard it is. So we could go into effects here. And if we go to configure the digital effects, we have a send amount here. And then we can change the type. And let's go change. Can I step through this now? I don't want reverb and delay. I just want something like a delay. That looks right. So we have 2 delays, and let's see. Hey, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. It's a lot of fucking... Why is that? Is that like just 2 delays maybe is what I'm seeing here? What about just if I want just something? Mono delay, there we go. Ping pong delay, that's what I want. Then we can look at the parameters here and we can kind of see what the milliseconds are. What I'm messing with are the dampening settings there. And now let's just kick it into unison mode for fun. Juan of Nutella. This is mine. I bought this with my own money, just like I've bought all of these because nothing says a midlife crisis like a room full of synthesizers. Carl from Angel Spit asks, can you control effects parameters with MIDI? I do not know the answer to that one. If I'm being honest, the manual's over 200 pages. I'm just getting started. Can the mod wheel change the reverb delay time or reverb depth? I am pretty sure you could. So if we went into the mod matrix, and there's a bunch of different things. So right now, mod wheel is the source. And so let's go to digital effects, and then let's see here. It's got to be doable. Let's see if modulation source could be. Let's go look at the source here and go find. I've got MIDI CCs. Yeah, so you can control this with MIDI CCs. You could control it with like envelope 1, attack, decay 1 or 2. These have 2 decay stages and 2 release stages. We haven't even talked about that. Even things like MIDI stop, master clock, those are all modulation sources. MIDI volume, voice random, which I used earlier to get stereo panning on the voices. Random panning, not truly stereo. Mod wheel here. So it's just so many things. It can be kind of hard to know where they are. And then the destination could be, there's a left and right send. And then the level, let's turn the level all the way up. But let's turn the offset all the way down. Let's see if, yeah, so with the level, wait, nope, there's still some echoes in there. So maybe I need to go back to the config here and turn the send down. There we go. So no echoes, and then we'll see if it works when I turn this up. Nope. Okay, so something I'm doing wrong there. Yeah, modular synth wall. That's another good midlife crisis. So I'm sure the fault there is with me and not with the synthesizer. Something, and I don't want to spend too much time on it just because it could be kind of boring for me just like digging through the menu here. But I'm sure it's one of those things that once you know how to do it, you could really do it pretty easily because everything in the synth is like that. There's just like an insane amount of modulation matrix possible. So let's go to program, new program, store, and we're back to our default program here. So what I want to do is create an Oberheim brass pad now. So let's just turn low pass up. And you'll notice it is already pre-routed here. So I have mod 1, 2, and 3, right? And so what we could do is if I hit that, you can see the ribbon is the first mod source, but we can actually use 3 mod sources at least, and we have a dedicated button for each one, which is really great. So what I'm going to do, though, for right now is just turn the resonance down, filter all the way up. And actually what we've been listening to, most of this, has been the triangle and sawtooth waves on at the same time. Now, this might be where some people say this synth sounds a little thin, because listen to the sawtooth on its own. Bill, I'd love to know too. Of course, if I could have gotten a black one, I would have. I do think they are gorgeous, but it is a very, very bright sound. Maybe too bright for some people. To me, I like when a synth doesn't get too bright, because then it loses that vintage warmth. And I think also kind of contributes to the synthesizer kind of having its reputation for sounding a little virtual analog-y. Not that that's a bad thing, but just when you've spent as much as you probably have to buy one of these, you want it to sound like an analog synth. Now, the oscillators are U726, I think is the name of the original Moog oscillators, which again, the team asked Bob Moog, hey, do you mind if we use the same oscillator circuit from the Mini Moog to make these oscillators? So it's pretty crazy. But let's go over to the square wave here. So I'm going to turn the sawtooth off on both of them. And now we have square wave, and we do have pulse width modulation. So let's just turn oscillator 2 off real quick. Oh, some nice little glitchiness there. There's probably a dirty pot that I need to clean up. Definitely a little glitchiness in there. We could do some big bass sounds after this aquatic, but I just want to start at least. Ooh, yeah, it's a little crispy in there. Now we do have pulse width modulation already routed. So I have a separate, so I've got 3 mod sources over here on the right and a separate PWM. And I should take a second and talk about Axel Hartmann, the designer of this synthesizer. If you haven't heard of Axel Hartmann before, you certainly are familiar with his products because he designed things like Super Gemini, Polybrute 12, some of the Moog 1, he designed that one too, the actual layout and everything. Going all the way back to synthesizers like the Waldorf Microwave and the indomitable Waldorf Wave from 1993 that they only made so many of. And it just has that. Yes, I've got some deoxit right down here, so we'll have to, dirty pot after a night on the town. We'll have to clean that up. This is one of those things, aquatic, that to me is on the verge of being the perfect synthesizer. Yeah, there's a little menu diving and stuff, but that's only for, modulation. Almost everything is kind of set up for you. And again, like the fact that you have a PWM button that brings up the menu, as well as 3 other buttons and a view button. So that's just if you want to see what everything's doing. So it's enabled, and then I can just increase the level here. And we can see that's LFO 3. So then it's as simple as, and you can see we can get some pretty fast. It's going just a little through 0, so let's bring that down. Bring oscillator 2 in now. Go to its PWM, and yeah, now it's controlling both of those. But what we could do is we could offset the PWM here. So now we have a more complex PWM shape between the 2 oscillators. Because of that PWM offset, I'll show it to you without that real quick, or very little offset. Is there a way to turn that off? No. Tap the buttons. I can't remember what I was using that you could tap the buttons and it turns it off, but so you can hear that's kind of like your standard PWM, but if we go in here and we change the offset now, we can get kind of a different sort of PWM. I guess, I mean, as cool as that is, I don't think it's going to work for a classic Oberheim pad, but those are our options. And we could even, we could change the rate of LFO2. I think LFO2 is being routed on this one. So again, we're sort of getting into that that territory, that Oberheiming thing. If we want to fatten that up, let's just add the triangle waves in as well. And for me, that almost always sounds better to have the triangle wave in. It just gives the synth a little more weight. To me, that's the that sounds more vintage. But let's say we're crazy and we want to go even closer or more than that. I think we can even control, can we control the levels? Oh no, maybe not. It looks not. We have filter FM. I mean, there's so much here. We might have to actually mess around with that. Yeah, it does need a drink holder for some drinks, which, by the way, one more scum cheers in the chat, guys. What a fun stream tonight. I hope you guys are having fun. Such an honor to have this in here. That's what? That's no detune, right? That's just the PWM. That's so crazy. Let's dial that back a little then. You know, it's a little much, isn't it? Change the rate here a bit. Nothing like cheap port. All right, let's jump back over to the filter now. So now we've got a pretty fast sound here. It does swords and synthesizers. It does do splits if you want them. With 16 voices, it'd better do splits or dual modes and things like that, because otherwise, you know, what's the point of having a synthesizer with 16 voices if you're not going to do some multi-timbral stuff? So then we have control over how much of that, you know, if we want to take it from like trombone to trumpet. So like a nice dark. We could apply some key tracking, of course, right? It's bothering me. So let's go back to the PWM and simply set the didn't mean to do that. Set the LFO 3 to control both, and let's just do that. That'll make it nice and easy for us. So it's the same thing, and then about the same amount too. So about 60. If I turn the triangle waves off, to me, it starts to sound a little thin. Actually, sounds pretty good too. I hope I got a good deal on it too. It's always hard with vintage synths to know exactly what they trade for, especially the more expensive ones. So let's do the same thing again. So we're going to go to mod here and select, we're going to select, what is it? Sample and hold. And just try to figure, I guess once you get used to it, sample and hold level, then go to mode and then, let's see here, and then pick, try to find voice random. God, sequencer level can be a setting. Like there's all so much. Okay, voice random, and then the trigger on for all of these, and then back to the mod. I think I needed to set the offset to -50. Let's see if that moves the. It's not doing it. So what did I miss here? So voice level. Voice random, trigger. Huh. Oh, just had to turn it on. Well, I guess this is a good example of maybe one of the cons, right? I just did this at the beginning of the stream, and now I've already kind of forgotten what was the trick that I missed here to get it to work correctly. So one more time, back to the mod menu here, voice random, level 100%, trigger level. Very interestingly, it needed to be like dead center for it to work. So when I messed with that, very interesting that was there. CS30, incredible synth. Synthsonic, thank you very much for gifting 5 memberships to the channel. If you guys don't know, this channel is done entirely by me. I work basically as hard as I can when I'm not doing this channel to be able to do this, and it's you guys who directly contribute to the channel that make it possible for me to be able to take off work, because we've all got bills, right? And so I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Synthsonic Bill. I love the phrase Norwegian synth deflation. We shall see. Tripwell, the way it works with the gifted memberships is it's not random, but YouTube assigns them. So when Synthsonic gets them or something like that, you don't actually, like, he doesn't get to pick who they go to, sadly, which is a thing. Thank you very much, Carl, for shouting that out too. So right now, the ribbon controller, so we got a ribbon page here. Let's see here, source, and then if I go to routing, let's see here. Wow, it could do a bunch of different things. There's a bunch going on. I don't know if I need to go to like a mod matrix page or something. I know I was messing with it before and I figured out how to kind of, let's find let's see if we wanted to move it to, Jesus, there's so many things. No, so that's a source. Huh. Yeah, there's definitely a way to get in here. Enable. What's the enable page look like? Scroll. Let's see. There's a way to do this that's good. But I don't know. I'd have to open up the manual and figure it out again, because right now I think it's just to the filter. Sebastian Colmore, how's it going, my friend? Yes, the manual, for me, unfortunately, especially doing this on the internet, you've got to check the manual out sometimes. Let's increase some resonance. To me, that's getting into that Oberheim-y territory, right? Yeah, it is. It is absolutely one of the coolest looking synths. And we're not even using a sub oscillator. I think it sounds pretty good. Why don't we try it with the low pass Moog filter? So now we're sort of in Moog Muse territory. And with the resonance there, doesn't it just have that beautiful thing? If we take the attack out, now it just becomes that poly pad. And I really like that combination here of the two filter types, because the Moog filter gets very bright, very airy, very fizzy. And then if we're thinking to ourselves, okay, that sounds good, but why don't we thicken it back up? We got a couple of options. We could bring the triangle waves back in. Doesn't really do that much. Let's take the resonance out all the way and just bring in that low pass, maybe with the envelope amount down a bit. Now we've got two filters going. One that's giving us the body, right? So this is the body. And then we have that beautiful singing resonance. We go into unison mode here and just put it into unison 2 with just a tad of detune. Now it's going to trigger 2 of the 16 voices every time. And because we've set up this random allocation of voices, it's not going to put one voice hard left, one voice hard right. Although someone pointed out, I think you could do that. But we're going to get as this random movement of the voices. And this just gets... I hope you guys are listening in stereo, because if you're listening in mono, this might seem like a lot of to do about nothing, but The number, Sebastian, of records that I've listened to that you've either mixed and mastered or done yourself with Comor Commando, Icon of Coil. I really loved the one you did for Fix It that was like a drum and bass record that I would describe as ear jizz. So it means a lot coming from you. In LA, California, there's a Korg DW8000 for $250. That is one of my favorite synthesizers. And $250. It is crazy sometimes what you can do. Whenever I talk about street price on this channel, I always go off of the global marketplace, like eBay, Reverb, that type of thing. Tripwell, a DW8000 is a hybrid synthesizer released by Korg in 1985. It's got 8 voices and 16 waveforms, so it's not like super complicated. You can't morph wavetables like you can on a modern synth. It sounds so good, Tripwell. It's one of my favorite sounding vintage synthesizers, and they always come up cheap. I think they sold a lot of them. That would be my only guess. Not as many as they sold Micro Korgs and M1s, but they're just such a powerful, gorgeous thing. So I'm a huge fan of the DW8000. There's very few that I since like for me the DW8000 is an easy recommendation. The only other synth that like hangs out in that price point is like the Alpha Juno 2. But, you know, it doesn't have the two oscillators per voice. And then you get into some things like the JX3P, JX8P, but it doesn't have the hands-on controls. DW8000 doesn't either. But, you know, you could spend $1,000 on one of those synth. DW8000 for $250 is just something else. So I really like that sound, but let's tighten that up a bit. Let's bring the sustain down. We need to get into some. Now we're kind of into that a little bit more. Let's turn the sawtooths on. Fuck it. Let's get it going. That future pop territory, right? Yeah, Adapt Manipulate says DW8000 is an awesome synth. Yeah, so yeah, if we want to get a little of that funker voct type thing, or I suppose just trance in general, and as we take that unison detune further, we could go all the way into like full trance anthem. I mean, it could just get crazy, right? I just kept playing this little lick. It's not from anything, just, you know, messing around here. You know, no reverb, right? So we could go into the digital effects. We have a large plate as the sort of the setup here, but if we go and we could just change this to something else like large hall, right? And then we could go into the parameters here and see what we have to do to increase the decay. Let's see here. Let's turn the density and diffusion all the way up. Even with it, it doesn't sound... Let's turn the low pass filter off. I think part of it is the send level is probably too high, so it's actually pretty easy to clip the effects. Banana Rider asks, does it have reverse reverb like Bloom from the Alesis MIDI Verb 2? That's a great question. So if we go over to mod type, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's just go back. Let's change the type here. Let's see if we have something like that. Hall verb, kind of just stereo room, chamber. It's not letting me do it now. Oh, now we've got like multiple dual non-linear. Oh. Mono delay. I don't think... I'm not seeing anything. You could do stuff like plate and hall, plate and room at the same time, but I don't see anything that's like a Bloom reverb type. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, even with this this hall reverb, and let's see if it held my parameters. It didn't. So that's another thing. When you change the preset, it changes the parameters. And like listening to that reverb, my Alesis MIDI Verb 2, which came out, 10 years or more before this, I think does a better reverb. So some part of me is like, I don't know that I'm ever going to find myself using the effects necessarily. I don't know if maybe we can set up multiple ones. So for instance, we've got choruses, right? So that's kind of cool, if that's your thing. We've got pitch shifters. Leslie into a room. Chorus. We can even do a flanger into a delay into a room, so we can have like 3 effects at once. Lots of stuff. Chorus in a room. Chorus and a flanger. I would love like just like a hall and a reverb, but I don't know that I'm going to get it. Chorus into room again. I'm sure it's around here somewhere. You can actually do a chorus into a chorus, interestingly. But for me, something like a hall for this type of sound. But it just doesn't, And I think this is a big part of why the synthesizer sounds like a virtual analog, which again, I don't mean to use it as a pejorative, right? There's some really great virtual analog synths out there. The reason I don't have them is just because anytime I go to make like, I want to do a cool bass line or something like that, I'm probably just going to go to one of the analogs behind me, right? Like I just, when you have so many analog synths, you just don't tend to go to the virtual analogs as much. But for a lot of people, much better musicians who are watching this channel right now, certainly toured the world with virtual analog synthesizers. So, there's that. Where we're going, we don't need any onboard reverb. Vulture Mom asks, thinking about the legendary synthesizer test, did this synth bring anything new and inventive into the synth world? That's actually a really great question. My gut instinct is no. I can't really think of anything in particular that it did completely new. I think the only thing you can say is it's like definitely the most features you could possibly dream of in one synthesizer. That would be the only thing that I think maybe it could pass just off of. There hasn't ever been a synthesizer with a ribbon controller, 2 filters per voice. CS80 has 2 filters per voice, but only 1 oscillator per voice, right? So you could run it. Yes, that's right. So you could, when you're using it bitembrally, you do have a total of 4 filters, a high pass and a low pass per voice. Yeah, so there might not be a single thing other than it's got all of the controls that you might see on a virtual analog synth, but on a synth is capable. This mix of the filters, this might be the first time on an analog polysynth that you can blend between all of these. That might be the thing that would allow it to pass, now that I'm thinking about it. Yes, it will pass the Elvira test. Basically, any Axel Hartmann synth will. Although I know some people think this synth. I was looking up an interview with someone who loved the Alesis, and he said it's ugly as sin. I was like, what the fuck? Like, it's just, to me, this is one of the most gorgeous synthesizers. But I can't understand. It's a very peculiar, different looking synthesizer. So. Yeah, I mean, the thing is I just don't know about the effects. That reverb to me is pretty rotted. I'm not a fan. So let's just turn that off for now. And let's go to the analog effects. So here, we can turn it on, and then as we turn up the amount, you can hear this. It's on heavy mode right now. I don't know how well you can see the screen on the stream. So this is an analog, it is an analog distortion. We've got killer mode here. So why don't we just move it into killer mode? I mean, pretty killer, right? If you're doing, more of an industrial, like... that sort of that type of thing. I'm a little even iffy on the analog distortion. I appreciate that it's analog. You could have convinced me it was digital though. It sounds good. Digital distortion doesn't necessarily sound bad, but I wouldn't have necessarily known that it was actually a real analog chorus. The Prophet 12 behind me and the Modulus, you hear the analog chorus and you go, yep, that's analog. Turning that off. I also just think that the synth can be so distorted when you've cranked the resonance. It can be very hot. That you don't necessarily always need that. Like, I'm not really hearing a huge amount of difference there. Of course, I have it on the light mode. If I move it over to killer, and I guess turn the volume up here, probably have to turn this down. Well, that certainly is noticeable. Let's try like just light mode. I don't know. I mean, it's good. What do you guys think? Am I crazy for thinking the distortion is just not necessarily like the feature I would go to with this synth? I guess there's certain kinds of sounds that we could do that would benefit from that. Yeah, do you prefer that, Seb? I love that, Seb. Okay, so maybe if we're doing the distortion, I want to do 2 sounds, and we'll try to get it done. We got about 20 minutes left of the stream, so I'm going to try to make one in 10 minutes or less, and the other in 10 minutes or less. I saw Aquatic Borealis ask for a. The trick is distortion, then EQ, then reverb to clean it up. Yeah. I love it when you can run like a high pass filter before a distortion. That also can help clean it up a bit. And you can always boost that later. I'm saying that to everybody, not to you, Sebastian. I don't think there's a single trick under the sun that I could ever teach you. Yes, I appreciate that too, Crystal Love, the vintage industrial sample pack I sell. No reverse reverb effect that I could find. So really, you're better off using, I think, external effects with this, but we'll try a couple of things first. So I'm going to try to bang these out real fast. Let's go to a new program and new program store. So for this first sound, I want to get a really squelchy resonance with no envelope amount and full keyboard tracking. Maybe not full. What I'm looking for is this like mid-rangey sort of thing. And then we'll just go to square waves only, right? And we're not going to use... We're going to go to mono mode. Turn portamento on. Triangle waves. We just lose so much resonance when we use the Moog filters. Let's try it with the Oberheim one instead. And the goal is to get this really like punchy. This is a type of sound I've used before on a record, but it's hard to do with a vintage synth because you don't have distortion or anything to work with. And the trick to this sound is actually to get in here and use some pretty crazy... pushing the filter, and then to, you know, really kind of sell it, we do need some sort of big reverb or delay. So let's just go to large hall here, parameter 1, and just add some decay. What do we go back to config here? pretty close to a lead I used in a song called Still Alive off of the second Vulture Culture record. This would have been almost fucking, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. Something like that, where you're getting that sort of vibe to it. You know, something that... Tuning it to fifth sounds pretty cool. That's a pretty badass type of Vulture Culture type sound that I would do long before I had touched my first hardware synthesizer, back when I only used VSTs. But because I didn't have the inherent character of some of these vintage hardware synths, you have to create the character with a VST using things like distortion and effects. And I found that creating these sorts of like really deep, resonant, you know, pushing that into a distortion can sound really good. And in this case, this is a really cool patch. But we're going to throw it away. Go back to default program and go to new program. And now we're back to this little sheep of a sound. Very chill one, because I promised we'll do some sort of badass thing. So let's actually turn the low pass filter off and turn the pre-filter on. Maybe we'll go just back to the low pass here. Mod 2 could be LFO1, right? We could go get LFO1 and have that modulate the filter, right? Huh, that's interesting. Where's sub oscillator 2 at? Forgot we got that ring mod too. So we're going for this sort of big Reese type thing. Again, we should put it into mono mode and add some portamento, right? So we can go. And turn keyboard tracking off. I think it defaults on. This is the trick, is to add a little high pass in now. Effects on, analog. Distortion, we can turn the reverb off. I actually want to set it on easy so it's not going crazy. I believe it's vaultcult.bandcamp.com visions, which I appreciate. All of my music is available on Spotify, Apple Music, all of that stuff. Vulture Culture. Sometimes it can take a bit. I've done a bunch of songs with Miss FD, so it's also fun to search Miss FD and Vulture Culture. That's a good gateway drug into some of my music. Some of my music's pretty dark and sad. I always have a little bit more of an upbeat thing going when I'm working with her. Digital effects. Let's see if we could pick something that's a little bit more interesting. Quad chorus for pitch shifter. Like a phaser would have been nice, but I actually don't know if I've seen that really yet. So I don't really notice the difference there with the quad chorus on or not. Huh, weird. Lonnie, if you're on the website, there should be a section for merch. So that's vultureculture.live. One day I want to get just all the way onto the website and maybe just cut Bandcamp out. I really don't use Bandcamp anymore, sadly, because I do think they're a really great company, but my focus hasn't been on making money off of music for a long time. I do make money off of actually mixing and mastering is the main way I make money off of music for other artists, which, by the way, Apres Nuit, that's Apres La Nuit, they have a new album coming out soon, so very excited about that. But I appreciate all of the support, you guys. You guys are too amazing. So if we wanted to do that trip, we could go to Mod 2, and we could just pick, so Mod 2 here is on, and again, we have just this massive list, and we just go find LFO. Let's go to like LFO 2 and add some amount there, and gotten crazy. Is that the chorus there? Whoa. Really fucking went crazy with that. Maybe it's the offset? It's the offset. I don't really know what the offset does. So we can, that's now controlling. Actually sounds really cool if we moved it over to, what can we use? A sawtooth wave, right? If we use a saw, that could be really interesting. In this particular case, there is so much chaos going with the patch that you don't even really hear what the ribbon controller is doing there. The ribbon works. I mean, I can show you real quick if we just go to another default program here, and I just go, here's this boring patch. The default routing is just to the filter, right? So yeah, it works. It just isn't doing, that much on a patch that crazy. So, wow. What a journey we just went on with this thing. And we've really only, I say it a lot on this channel, we've only cracked the surface. We've only barely begun to dive into this bad boy. Before we go today, I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are on the Andromeda. Do you think it sounds cold? Do you think it sounds, she's turning off the cutoff knob. Do you think it sounds, I know it sounds crazy to say it, but do you think it sounds good? Because I will say one of my biggest appeals to the vintage stuff is just to have those instruments that give you that feeling, and that the way the filter breaks up and everything is just usually really gorgeous on the good ones. There are bad vintage synths, of course, but it seems like more often than not, a lot of the vintage synths have this just beautiful character to them that I don't always get from the modern synths, which I've said before. They tend to tune modern synths very balanced, which is great if you want a synth that can do everything. And I think the Andromeda is kind of this modern thing where it's very balanced. The SEM filter doesn't go too far out of control. The Moog filter is very nice. You've got the distortion that's okay. Yeah, it's what Carl said. It's a great blend of analog and digital vibe. Tracy says it sounded better than I was expected. Yeah, I do think too many people judge the synth by its presets, for sure. Yeah, the price is a lot. And I think the one thing I can say about the price for this is compared to every other synth I've bought, if you're just talking features, this is like, does everything. There's nothing missing. It's not entirely true. There's no vintage mode. And, when I was saying the, just the stereo panning is a motherfucker to set up. Compared to something like I said, the sequential synths, the DSI synths. So if you want a synth that has more voices than you'd ever know what to do with, and it's got voltage controlled oscillators, again, I think there's only three. I think there's only the Korg Prologue, the Moog one, and the Alesis Andromeda. Correct me if anybody can think of anything. But having said that, I could absolutely see how the Moog 1 could smoke this thing in what the Moog 1 does best. Because this does sort of push you down a certain path, like many vintage synths do, where they sort of knock you in a direction creatively, where you start to go, oh, okay, I want to do this type of thing with it, And I think the Korg Prologue, which I used to own, and I'm a huge fan of that synth as well, represents a very similar palette to this, but it's very immediate, right? Where you have 16 voices, you can do these huge super saws and everything, analog super saws, but it was very immediate. Everything was like I never felt lost. This synth, you do have to get involved with this menu for certain things. Like if you want to do, I think the modulation matrix is the big thing you need that for. And to be honest with you, I mean, we have sample and hold here, but I've been looking to see if there's just like a generic mod matrix page, and I haven't seen one yet. It's more like you just sort of access like, oh, I want to modify the bandpass filter. What do I want to do that with? And then it pulls up that, and then you can start adding more mods to it if you want. Does that make sense? I don't know what this process button does. So I can see this synth not being for everybody. I could even see a world where this synth isn't for me. But I think the unbridled power of this thing, the fact that this is like owning a Matrix 12, but with all the controls, you could really, I mean, they could not have added more controls to this, right? It's covered in knobs. It's absolutely infested. So with that in mind, compared to the Matrix 12, where you've got 6, right? Or something like a Hydra synth, 6 or so knobs. There's that. I mean, it feels like a virtual analog that's all analog, in the sense of like the layout feels like a great virtual analog, and then under the hood it's analog except for the effects. But, you know, it's not a home run in every possible way. Yo, we got the synth cat here. How's it going, you guys? Mogwan came out, what would it have been, like 2017 or so? So it would have come out 17 years later. Yeah. It is one of those things where it's a synth that yeah, even 5K, if you had to spend 5K for this, really the only thing, I mean, Moog Muse has a couple of things up its sleeve on this. And Polybrute 12 obviously has the polyphonic aftertouch. That's the thing that's the only feature that I think, you know, is starting to show its age 25 years later. I mean, think about that this synth still feels like one of the most advanced synths ever made 25 years later. So for me, I think it's a blue LCD screen would be beautiful on this. Unti Powerable. That's a great idea there. DeepMind 12, all the controls, right? You know, and that's the thing. I am leaning this year. I've leaned a little bit away from the vintage digital synths and a little bit more towards the synths that you can actually program. I'm the biggest fan of synthesizers that are difficult to program. You have to get into a menu and it's digital and, you know, whatever. Romplers. I love romplers and the sort of what I call ultraviolet synths. The Roland D50s, JD800s, wave stations, Insonic synths of the world. I love those synths. But there is something nice about just having the controls right there. And yeah. So looking forward. By the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed to Dubstation Zero's channel, he's been doing these modular jams that are just impeccable. They're so good on the eardrums. All of the sonic candy that man is able to make. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe to his channel. He's been doing some live streams, and I've only been able to catch him afterwards, but they're good. It's very good. Yeah, some more soft patches would be good to check out with this maybe next time. There were, yes, Bossa Joyo, there were no analog poly. So this was such a maverick move to come out with this synthesizer when it came out. To come out with a synth that was all analog, you know, it really is pretty incredible what they were able to do. Not for everybody, but for me, this is like, it's a lot like an Access virus that's analog. That's a way to think about it, for better or worse, right? It's got a little of that. But what I will say is, hopefully I've convinced some people out there to give this synth a second look, because I do think a lot of people out there looked at this synth as like, here's this kind of like, just doesn't sound that good, trashy, cheap, cold sounding synth. And I think when you use a lot of arpeggiator and the cheap and cold sounding digital effects, I think it can sound that way. But I think if you were to use this with modern effects, which I think I'll do next time, I think I'll set up some effect sends. We'll get into some stuff that takes it a little further, right? I do think this synth benefits from some sequences. I'd love to get into the sequencer some more. This is actually a synth I would use it on, because it could take you into that, you know, that sort of territory, future poppy type thing for sure. Yeah. Awesome, Synthcat. How have you been, my friend? Is there a VST? IK Multimedia makes something, but it might be sample based. I'm not sure. Nymphess is a very raw, very cool poly, and it's so cheap, it's so affordable. Get a polyphonic, I think it responds to MPE, right? So $400 or $500 used polyphonic aftertouch MIDI controller, and you're like way ahead of most other analog synths nowadays. Yeah, IK Multimedia has it in Synthronic. Yeah. I think the digital effects are what they are. It's so funny because so much of the music I love came from the 90s and 2000s, you know. But for whatever reason, I don't find the sound that inspiring. And it might just be one of those what I grew up with is less exciting sort of a thing. So, you know, I think a lot of people were selling their memory moogs to buy whatever new synth came out that was all digital, right? Because that was kind of the previous gen. For me, I grew up in the era of digital synths and VSTs. And so when I hear that sort of, you know, VST type sound, like old VST reverb in this, it kind of brings me, I'm like, it just doesn't sound that good, because maybe when I was growing up and the only reverb I had was like built into Reason, right? I was like, my music doesn't sound as good as the guys who are using the real stuff, right? But now, just like the vintage stuff has its own sort of vibe, its own grooviness, its own charisma, I do think the 90s has that too now. And some hip-hop producer is going to make a beat and they're going to use only something like an Ensoniq synth or a Korg synth from that era to make it, and they will bring the 90s back. They will bring that sound. I guarantee you could make a banger with something like that. Sensonic, I do agree. I have the absolute, I shouldn't even say I have. I am so fortunate that the best community on YouTube watches these videos and hangs out with me on Wednesday nights, because it's really you guys who've made this stream what it is. It's not me. I just get to be the jabroni in front of the camera playing with some stuff, but it's really you guys who have informed me, have taught me so much. I can't even begin to say thank you enough, not just for being here and making the channel what it is, but also for, like I said, informing me, making me a better musician. The knowledge base of the people who watch this channel. I'm never unaware of the fact that I am not the smartest person about any synth I've ever talked about. In the chat, there's going to be someone. So I just want to say thank you again. Yeah, I got to get into there. So I do want to get a Quadrasynth, an Ion, some of the other Alesis stuff on the channel at some point too. But I think this is a good place to call it for tonight. So with that, guys, I hope you have a fantastic week. Continue to be excellent, and I will see you in the next video.